In this tutorial, I will show you how to use Oscillator in Cavalry. Oscillator is one of the fundamental modifiers in Cavalry, and you can create complex animations very quickly, as you can see from the examples on the screen. The best place to learn about Oscillator is the documentation page on the Cavalry website, and you can learn about it in quite a detail, and it features a number of examples as well. So I put together a number of examples for you to explore, and if you want to play with them, you'll be able to download the project file we will create from Gumroad store below for a small donation fee. In its essence, Oscillator outputs a signal that goes positive to negative or 0 to a value. And you have different types of waves, as you can see on the screen: sine, opposite, cosine, and tangent wave, which I don't really understand, but it's there if you want to use it. We have option to output a square wave, triangle, and sawtooth. With the latest updates of Cavalry, we can actually create our own little waves. However, in this tutorial, I will show you more practical uses of using a simple sine wave to create a rather complex animations. Okay, so let's get started. I have a simple composition, and here are the specs. It's about 100 frames long. Okay, so I have a simple text layer. I'm just going to hold Option, click on a duplicator, and this will put this layer directly into input shape of a duplicator. Next, let's switch to point, maybe make it like 20 copies. Let's add oscillator to the shape position Y. If you press play, the layer just goes up and down a little bit. So let's have a look what is happening. This is the main panel for the oscillator. And starting from the top, we have the strength. So this is the overall strength of this modifier. Strength fades to 0. This checkbox means that oscillator values will fade to 0 and then go below. It's more like a technical checkbox. You can read more about this on the Cavalry website, where every single property is explained in more detail. Next, we have types of oscillator waves. I will come back to them in a second. What I'm interested is these two properties. Let's put this one at 0 and the second one at 500. Press play, and this whole thing jumps up and down very, very quickly. So to slow it down, let's reduce the frequency to maybe 0.5 and zero out the stagger as well. Okay, so we have a simple layer movement up and down, up and down. The oscillator works by outputting values, or a signal if you wish, that goes between minimum and maximum value. So in this case, the minimum is 0, which is where our layer was, the duplicator, and max, it simply adds 500 pixels. That's why the whole thing moves up. We can reverse it by sending it down, or make it go up and down. Let me just add 500 to it, press play, and as you can see, this whole thing will just go up and down, up and down. So this is how you control the oscillator movement. This is the amount it will move based on these two values. Let's just find the highest value like this. We can offset this value by adding or subtracting from these two values. I'm just going to leave it as it is. Stagger simply delays each initial wave. At the moment, as you can see, this visualizer shows a single wave. If we just increase this a little bit, we are getting more waves populated here in our behavior visualizer, and every single layer in a duplicator gets delayed as well. And if I scroll through, you can see how everything just goes up and down with some sort of echo effect. Stagger is really powerful when you keep it at a very small numbers, so you get this like a stylized echo effect of sorts. I'm just going to leave it at 0 for the time being. Separate channels button is useful if your oscillator affects two properties at once. At the moment we are affecting only one property, so I will just leave it as it is, unchecked. Then the next section is all about time. So this is the speed of your oscillations, of your movement. If we change the frequency to 2, this thing will go crazy. And you can see how quickly the movement's happening by number of waves visible in this top box over here. And there's one more little tip. If you select a graph editor and select your layer, which is affected by the oscillator, you will see a quick visualization of this shape position property displayed over here as well. So this is useful to see what is happening with your layer if you're not sure what your modifier is doing. Let's change the frequency to 0.5, and as you can see, the number of waves updated here and in this visualizer as well. They do not match because this one fills up the range of our timeline. Well, this one, I guess, just fills up the range in this preview box for the performance reasons, I could guess. Time offset lets us simply offset the phase of the wave. So for example, I want to start the movement from the bottom. So I can simply just move this animation little bit by little until I get to the very bottom of the wave, which is about here. And it will play perfectly. Timescale is basically multiplier of the time for the oscillator itself, all of these properties. If you have it, you get only 2 waves. You can multiply it times 5, you get more waves. So this is a way to slow it down or speed it up. I'm going to change it to 1. Now, the one thing I didn't cover yet is the types of the waves. Cosine is simply inversion of the sine wave. Tangent, I never used it, but it gives you this really weird tangent looking wave. You have to read more about it online. I guess it's like more dramatic in and out. Just leave it on the first one and the sine, and the wave style varies as well. For example, we have square, so this layer will move up and down, nothing in between. Triangle, it goes up and down without any smoothing. Sawtooth simply goes from a minimum value to max and then drops immediately afterwards. And finally, the interesting one, which is the custom wave, which enable us to use this graph. And let's right click on it and we can add our own little point. And this wave and this graph let us customize the wave that will be generated. As you can see, we get this double jump, and the whole thing is controlled with this tiny little graph over here. Okay, I'm just going to change everything back to sine and normal. So let's make this a little bit more interesting and practical. First, I will grab the minimum value, drop it on max, right click, add expression, type in value times -1. This will simply invert this value, so that will let me quickly customize minimum and maximum value without going back and forth between both of them. So our layer moves up and down. Now here comes the fun part. We can slowly slow it down, maybe something like 0.2. When you play it, it just goes up and down with some sort of echo. To make it more interesting, I'm going to select my oscillator text layer, right click on the color and find index to color. You can pick any color you want. I have a simple array of colors. And I'm going to select this gradient stop, grab a color, drop it on this color field, do the same with the background. Simply click to place another stop, and maybe this time add an orange one and one more. Let's make it blue. Just make sure the gradient stop is active before you drop a color, so you link them from color array to your gradient. So this one is going to be just about maybe like 0.05. So this P position represents the position of a gradient stop across this gradient, from 0 being here, 1 here. And I want the red to be really close to the finishing line. Make it 1. And let's add some contrast. I can limit how many copies get affected by this change. Blue is fine as it is. We got nice gradation over here. And it looks like our text is blending into the background itself. So this is where the fun part happens. Let's make about 100 copies of this oscillator. Play, and as you can see, you got oscillator with a faded tail going on. Let's just make it maybe around 600. Let's see what's going to do. And that's way too much. That's maybe like about 500 should be more than enough. Now, to loop this animation perfectly, there are instructions on the Cavalry website, but it's simply, you just take the add math node to the frequency. You can enter the frame rate, which is 25 in this case. Then you divide it by number of frames you want the loop to happen. So in this case, I have 100 frames. So I just divide it by 100. When you press play, this animation will perfectly loop over the duration of your composition. So that was a nice and simple example of how to make this popular tail animation of sorts. And as you can see, if you really zoom in, you start seeing the extra copies. They're not perfect. So you can fix that by adding more and more layers, but this will simply increase the kind of the length of the tail. So as the animation goes up, the tail starts coming down. For the performance reasons, I'll just keep it at around 100. You can play, for example, with, time scale, maybe slow it down. Then animation will look more buttery smooth, but it will play slower, so it won't loop across this composition. So it's all about trial and error, trial and error. I'll just leave it on the value of 1, because that should be fine when you export the final animation. So what else can we do? One thing that's interesting is we can use this data and remap it to affect different property. So let me show you how. I'm going to add number range to the font size. And a quick overview is simply number range takes minimum and maximum property, then takes a behavior or modifier or keyframe animation in the value itself that should be between these two values, and it remaps it between min and max values. It's similar to linear expression in After Effects. So in practice, we can grab minimum value from oscillator, drop it on source min, maximum value from oscillator, drop it on source maximum, and then grab the oscillator itself, drop it on the value. And finally, I want the font size to be between maybe 25 and about 150. And let's press play. And as you can see, this whole thing goes kind of like back and forward in a distance. But I'm not done yet. The graph at the bottom lets us remap those values further, for example, like so. So now we got this crazy movement in the middle, and everything is being driven by a single oscillator. if we come back to our oscillator, you can change how high this thing goes, and since everything is linked, this will automatically update. So this is how you can use Oscillator to drive your animations. Next, I will show you how to use it as a deformer on the mesh itself. I have a simple composition. Going to create a basic line. Keep it at around 1920 pixels. Let's make it red so you can actually see it better. Maybe change the stroke size to something like 20. In the previous example, we used Oscillator to drive a property and change it over time. We can use Oscillator as a deformer for a mesh, so we have to add it through the Deformers menu and find it somewhere here. When you press play, the line goes sideways, essentially. So what is happening? We have to go to the Deformer tab and click Use Normals. When you press play now, we got this wiggly line happening. So back again to the behavior. And as before, I'm going to zero out Stagger and change the frequency to something smaller like 0.5. Do the previous trick of linking properties so we can -1 invert it easily. Let's have minimum of about 200 pixels. Perfect. So when you play this, as you can see, the oscillator simply deforms the mesh and everything is happening through one checkbox. Now there's a little bit of tricky parts because we have number of divisions. So this is number of vertices, as you can see on this line, and they get deformed. If I increase this number to like 20, we got more deformation. The deformation create a little bit of hard edges, even when the oscillator is set to sine, which is supposed to be a smooth wave. So the way to fix the curvature is simply by adding more divisions. Press play. We still get those angles in between those points. So you can keep adding the divisions maybe to like 40, but at some point the oscillator will go crazy. So that's a little bit of a gotcha, as you can see, because this number should be equal to the divisions number or higher, but at some point, again, it gets a little bit crazy. So what is going on? Simply, let's just keep these two numbers equal. And to smooth the shape of the line, we have to add subdivide modifier. Subdivide will populate this line with loads of points. And something like maybe 2 will be just fine. Perfect. So the deformer part on the oscillator is simply adding a number of waves. As you can see, it's 20, but our line has only 20 points to deform. So it's a little bit weird one to understand, but if you play with these numbers, you might be able to get what you need in terms of the look and so on. And finally, a Falloff tab. So this lets us limit the effect of the oscillator, and this will be super visible on a mesh. As you can see, we can create something like a circle of sorts. Let's make it 700. Now I'll hold Option, select the duplicator, and again select point. Make maybe something like 10 copies, and again nothing is happening. Simply go back to your oscillator and bump up the stagger just a tiny bit, maybe 1. Go back to your basic line and let's change it to maybe like 4. Press play and we got a nice and easy animation. We can take our index to color, drop it on stroke, and we've got this psychedelic looking wave of sorts. And this is where the fun starts, because we got everything linked very nicely. We can play with these values. We can stagger the effect even more. And if you start noticing a little bit of an angle on your line, you can simply increase number of subdivisions. So on a full screen, this should look perfectly fine. My index to color looks like this. I'm just going to change subdivide from now to 1 for the performance reasons, so my laptop doesn't explode. And you can change number of copies to a higher number to have some sort of space look, if you wish. And go back and play with the Stagger and so on. There's lots of things you can do with it. Oscillator is really powerful when you combine it with other deformers, other oscillators. In this example, as you can see, I have a flying comet of sorts. And as before, this is a simple text layer with a number of copies. And let's just bump up a number of copies to something like 300. And we have a flying comet of sorts. I put together a number of examples so you can really explore them and see how I build them and look at the logic behind them, like for example adding a fake depth of field in Cavalry. I hope this was useful, and again, if you want to download the project file, it will be available on the Gumroad for a small donation. Thanks for watching.